Subtracting integers. We're going to use a number line for subtracting integers, and then I'm going to show you a trick. So 4 minus 2. Let's say that, remember when we start on a number line, we always start at 0. So we are moving to the right 4 spaces. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces to the right. And if we are subtracting 2, then that means, so we end up right here, so that means we're going back 2 spaces. 1, 2. So we are moving back to 2. So we end up at 2. So what I want to show you is that really 4 minus 2 is the same thing as 4 plus negative 2. What I've done is I have taken my minus sign and I changed it into plus a negative. So 4 minus 2 is the same thing as 4 plus negative 2. Alright, what about negative 5 minus 3? Well, let's start at 0. We're going to move which way? It's a negative. So we're going to move to the left. We're going to start here, move to the left 5 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we moved negative 5 spaces. We are going to now subtract 3. So when we subtract on our number line, we move 3 more spaces to the left. So 1, 2, 3. So we end up right here. Let me go ahead and write negative 5, and then I'm going to write minus 3. So where do we end up? Right here at negative 8. So again, what I want you to see is that negative 5 minus 3 is the same thing as negative 5 plus negative 3, because 5 negatives and 3 negatives make 8 negatives. So when you are subtracting, you are adding a negative. Let's look at the next one. Make sure you're writing these down. 2 minus negative 1. All right, this one's a little different. So we start at 0. We move which way? Well, this is a positive 2, so we move 1, 2 places to the right. So we move 2 places. We are subtracting a negative 1. Well, if I was subtracting just, like you learned in elementary school, I would go to the left. But I'm not just regular subtracting. I am actually subtracting a negative. So instead of moving just to the left, if I want to subtract a negative, I have to do the opposite of that. And I have to move to the right 1. So what I have ended up with is positive 3. Remember, if you're just regular subtracting, you'd move to the left. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to just move to the left because I want to subtract a negative 1. So 2 minus negative 1 is the same thing as 2 plus 1. So what I did is I added the opposite. I added the opposite of negative 1, which is positive 1. Negative 5 minus 2. All right, let's start at 0. Negative 5, so I'm going to move over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces. I don't want to just subtract 2. I want to subtract a negative 2. So, okay, so here I am at negative 5. So I don't want to continue to move to the left. I don't want to do that because I'm subtracting a negative 2. So that means I've got to move back to the right 1, 2 spaces. So I end up right here at negative 3. So negative 5 minus 2 is the same thing as negative 5 plus a positive 2. I changed my minus to plus, and the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. This is a difficult concept to understand on a number line. Everything seems backwards. So in summary, or in conclusion, subtraction is the same action as adding the opposite. So every time you see a subtraction problem, what I want you to do is add the opposite. So write down 3 minus 2. Now instead of 3 minus 2, we are going to add, what is the opposite of 2? It's negative 2. Okay? All I did, I kept the first number the same. First number stayed the same. And then I added the opposite of 2. So now you can say that 3 positives and 2 negatives would be 1 positive. All right, let's look at another one. Let's do 4 minus negative 1. Okay, what are we going to do? We are going to add the opposite. Notice, I am not going to change this number. So I'm going to take my 4 and I'm going to add the opposite of negative 1, which is a positive 1. And we know that 4 and 1 is 5. We added the opposite of negative 1. Okay, let's look at another one. Negative 7 minus 5. I'm going to add the opposite. I'm going to keep negative 7, and I'm going to add, what's the opposite of 5? It is negative 5. So now I have 7 negatives and 5 negatives, and that makes 12 negatives. Add the opposite. So I change my minus to plus. The opposite of 5 is negative 5. Alright, so what some of my students, I have seen them do is just change the minus to plus and then add in a negative. Okay, that's one thing that you can do, make it a little bit easier. So negative 2 minus 4, what I would do is I would rewrite it as negative 2, add, what's the opposite of 4? Negative 4. Or do you see how these two are the same? So negative 2 plus negative 4 is negative 6. Add the opposite. So what I would like you to do is write down these problems, and then I want you to rewrite them as addition. Change all subtraction to addition. Every time you see a subtraction problem from now on, change it to addition. So go ahead and change these problems to addition and see if you get the answers. Then, so pause right now, and then I'll show you the correct answers. Okay, so here are the answers. I have changed all of my subtraction to addition by adding the opposite. Remember, your first number stays the same. You change minus to plus, and then the opposite of the second number. So check your work and make sure that you have gotten these correct. If not, pause and rewind until you understand. So now you're going to write your summary. I want you to include examples as well as your explanation. So make sure that you use some of the examples from the video, and then I want you to write down any questions that you might still have about the concept and be very specific with your questions.